I'm Eric Loy, and welcome to Loy Interviews. On this podcast, we talk with folks from the VTuber community on their channels, their talents, their stories, where they come from, and their plans for the future. Xionfox joins us. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Another member of the Love-Chu folks coming on, and everybody I've talked to has been absolutely wonderful from that group, by the way. We'll be hearing a little more from the group as a little foreshadowing a little later in the interview. But first of all, please introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi there, my name is Xionfox. I'm your friendly North American voice actress, singer, dancer, cosplayer, idol, VTuber, convention coordinator, potato snacky connoisseur, and Love-Chu Generation 4 member extraordinaire.
Jiminy Christmas. So you've got your irons in a lot of fires.
I do. I do a little bit of everything.
So have you always been a performer type?
Yeah, I've always been on the stage or doing something. I was in band in high school, orchestra in middle school. That kind of evolved into, once I got into anime more, I started doing voice acting. First doing it just for practice, and then 2017 I went professional. And started doing idol stuff around the same time. Convention coordinating kind of came along. It sounds like a lot, but it wasn't like I woke up one day and I was like, I want to be all of this all at once. It just kind of happened.
It was added along the journey as you went, instead of just one big lump.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this: you definitely have a voice for it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I would hope so. I do it for a job.
Yes. It's a voice that certainly lends itself to voice acting for sure. When did you decide you want it? Was it your fanship of anime that kind of pushed you toward wanting to do voice acting?
So I always kind of wanted to do some form of acting. My mom was really interested in me doing acting. And when I was a kid, I was actually bit in the face by a dog. And so I became very sad about that, thinking I could never do anything acting-wise. And I kind of gave up on that dream until I was watching Inuyasha one day. It's a very popular anime.
Oh, yeah.
And back then, there was no DVR. There was no pausing. So I went to the bathroom, came back, and I started seeing all the names in the credit scenes. And I was like, okay, I recognize the character names, Inuyasha, Kagome, Sango. But then there were like other people's names. And I was like, who are these people? So I remembered the name and I looked them up on the family computer the next day. And I realized they're voice actors. And it never dawned on me that people actually went into these studios to record for these shows. And it was an immediate love. I was like, that is what I want to do with my life. And that was probably 2008, 2009.
Wow. So you had that goal for a long time.
Very, very long time. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication, especially when you don't have a lot of money to go take classes.
Right.
So it was a lot of late nights reading books out loud to myself and online YouTube tutorials on enunciation and breath support.
Whoa. So you are, not only are you a voice actor, you're a self-taught voice actor.
I think in my entire voice acting career so far, I've only taken one professional workshop, and then I also took theater my senior year of high school, but it ended up being one of those classes where it was kind of a throwaway class. People took it just so they wouldn't have to take like an extra math class or something. So
yeah,
I was very sad when we didn't do much acting in it.
Well, did you do any acting after school?
No, I mainly did online projects. I was on a website called the Voice Acting Alliance for a short period of time, and everything I did was from home. When I first started voice acting, I had a $5 karaoke revolution mic and a dream. And my parents were like, oh God, she's yelling. What is happening? Eventually they made it into this little game of how many recordings could they mess up.
Oh. So
they'd be like in the background making like little noises, or they'd be like, what are you doing? You have to go to the store. I'm like, I'm trying to record.
Thanks, folks. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, obviously you've done well with it, because you're still going at this point. But when you do the voice acting, and see, radio guys are incredibly jealous of voice actors because
Oh, you guys are
all
amazing.
we did was like local commercials for whatever was on sale at the local store. That's as close as we
Oh,
get to voice acting. But the do you do different voices or do you do different accents? Um, or do
good
you
question.
just use the instrument that you got?
Well, when people think of, especially when it comes to anime and video game acting, people think that they have to do these weird and crazy voices all the time.
Hmm.
But you'll actually find out that 90% of the roles that you'll book are booked with your normal voice. Booked meaning that you get cast as that character and you voice that character in the show. And so I was one of those people who practiced like a ton of like random voices. I practiced a lot of screaming and the overly emotional type stuff like crying
Yeah.
and maniacal laughters. And I found that in the last, 6, 7 years that I've been doing it, I've barely done any of that. The hardest things that I found to do is to carry on a natural conversation because
Oh,
that's most of what anime is. It's like, oh, it's a schoolgirl anime. They're just talking to their friends in the classroom, like, hey, did you pass the test? What do you think of Keiichi-kun? And it's very difficult to carry on a natural sounding conversation
right.
while not overacting it.
Oh yeah, and you just see that in anime, the
Hmm.
dubs where they just really go over the top with it, and you're like cringe. And even the like the super popular ones, there's always like one it's like no, not quite right. But
Hmm.
so do but have you done different? I mean, I could do a voice once, but I couldn't do it a second time. I couldn't.
So it really depends. Like I've done everything. Like most of what I've done is what's called simuldubs,
Mm,
where we will be dubbing the anime as it's still coming out in Japan. So Japan will release episode 1,
mm.
and then we'll get the raw like audio and sound effects and music and everything from the Japanese studio, and we'll adapt the script and localize it. So we're not talking about random samurais in the street. We'll probably be talking about what are those street performers doing, and there's a whole art to it, and I definitely like tip my hat to our translators and localizers because I know their job is not easy.
Mm.
And then once all of that is done, it'll come to the studio. The directors will uh, work on casting the show. Once they're cast, we'll come in, we'll record an episode a week. And the turnaround time is probably like 2 weeks for recording. And then on the third week, it's like mixed, mastered, and released on the third week.
That's actually pretty a lot faster than I would have thought. Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, given everything that's involved in it, it doesn't take nearly as much. Of course, technology does help. Uh,
Yeah,
back
there are
in
other shows that what I call just back recording shows, meaning that the shows have already been released in the past. Like a big one that I've been working on for the last few years is a show called Natsume's Book of Friends.
mm,
The show released like years and years ago, and we started back recording on it and recording the English dub for it back in 2021, I
mm,
believe.
yeah.
And it's a little bit more relaxed. So like if you get sick, it's a little bit easier for them to be like, okay, we'll just push the episode back. Especially for these last like season 4, season 5, season 6, we've had the ability to, you know, push back like the release date a little bit. We had a little bit of wiggle room.
Hmm.
But with simuldubs, like if you get sick, somebody has to record for you and you have to re-record later on when they have
Oh,
studio time.
oh my gosh, yeah. And that's something else that people don't realize. That no matter what you're using your voice instrument for, uh,
Mhm.
any little an allergy, uh, just one day you wake up with a stuffy nose or something, and your voice changes, and now you're having a tough time just being yourself, let alone somebody else.
part I've been able to handle it. There's been a few times like I got sinusitis earlier this year when I was recording for Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy season 2.
Yeah.
And there was a huge episode that my character, the goddess, was in where I had no voice, no nothing. And they brought in somebody else to record and she did a phenomenal job. And that dub was up on the website for like 2 months
Mm.
before we finally had studio time to get me back into the studio to re-record because we were simul-dubbing it. So we had to keep going, 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 going.
Mm.
So,
It's it's a different world for folks out there. Any little thing can affect your voice, from what you ate that day to the temperature in the room to how dry it is to all that stuff. And for somebody such as yourself, that it is vital to what you're doing, all of that uh, can change in a moment.
it really can. It really
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
But you just got to take care of yourself. You're your number one asset. That's like my number one advice when people ask me for advice in anything that I do.
Mhm.
Because again, I do a lot. They're like, how do you do it? It's like, you are your number one asset. You have to take care of yourself because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to do the things that you need to do. So when
Absolutely.
people feel bad for having to take a day off because they're sick, you didn't wake up this morning and decide, oh, man, I think today's a great day to be sick. Nobody does that.
Mm.
But, you're not invincible. You're human just like everyone else.
Yep.
Everybody has their days. So
Yep.
take care of yourself first and foremost.
Says the person who has a million things on their plate.
That is why I have to take care of myself.
Now, how did you get started with VTubing?
With VTubing, it was a rather simple step. I started VTubing in 2020. However, I had actually been streaming since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I started out with just like normal face cam streams. I worked on cosplay, did just chatting, did digital art, just hung out, had a good time. And when the pandemic hit, I moved back in with my family to help them out. Plus, I was going through some stuff. And I was introduced to VTubing. And I was like, I've been thinking of going back to streaming because I went on hiatus when I moved back in with my parents
Right.
because they didn't want me to show their house in any form or capacity. And, I wanted to be respectful of my parents.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stream, but I couldn't because I couldn't show their house. And I was like, I'm not going to just show a blank screen when I'm streaming. Like, what? And I got introduced into VTubing. And I was like, who doesn't want to be a cute anime girl? Like,
Yeah.
I already voiced them, so I might as well be one.
As you already had experience.
And this friend who introduced me to VTubing, they also wanted to be a VTuber, but they had been preparing for like years. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to spend years preparing.
Yeah.
So it's very type A versus type B personality. Like within a week, I had like I made my own really terrible avatar in VRoid Studio and I just went gung-ho, and a couple of weeks later, Genshin Impact released, and that was like my bread and butter of content
Right.
for like the first 6 months of me streaming as a VTuber.
Once you get
So
caught
it's
in
like-
once you get caught in the Genshin Impact, it's hard to let go.
I know the husbandos have a death grip on me, I swear.
Well, I tell you, it's a completely different story for you than a lot of folks I interviewed. Some folks, a lot of folks go in, they don't have the experience being the avatar on the screen. You already had a lot of experience being the avatar on the screen. So, was it comfortable for you doing this different type of medium?
It was different. And I say because I also started doing gaming streams.
Yeah.
When I started doing streaming back in 2017, I had this old laptop that could just barely run OBS, and any music I had on my stream had to be played on my phone. And so I had to choose between chat or music on my phone.
Oh.
So it was very much I did not even have the ability to even run video games. Even though I wanted games, I couldn't. And so um, I started VTubing in 2020 around my birthday, and my friends kind of came together and helped me build a PC that could handle playing games and streaming and whatnot because they realized like, oh, she's just not going to stop and she's kind of being hindered. You know what, let's do it. And so they made it happen, and I'm very appreciative of the friends that have helped me along the way.
Yeah.
And I got started up, and it was definitely a huge learning curve because I'm not only learning about the VTubing, I'm learning how to set up streaming for video games. I'm now playing video games more than what I was before because I'd just be playing Solitaire or Minesweeper, and now I'm playing these open world massive games.
Yeah. Yeah.
And learning how to use my new computer. So it was a lot. All at once. I
Yeah.
was like, welcome to the technological age. Oh,
So how did you get involved with Love-Chu?
so that's kind of a funny story.
Mm-hmm.
I had a stream back in early February of this year
Mm-hmm.
where I just returned from another hiatus that I had taken. And I was telling them that I was thinking of joining an agency and auditioning for agencies potentially,
Yeah.
and that I would do it for probably like a month or two. And if nothing panned out, I was actually contemplating the thought of making my own.
Mm.
But now that requires a lot of forethought and time and effort. And it's another hat to
Yeah.
wear,
Yeah.
CEO of a company. So it was not something that I was really wanting to take on,
Right.
but it was something that I was starting to think about. There were spreadsheets that were starting to happen
Uh-oh.
on my computer of like pre-planning for the potential for it,
Yeah.
and the crying at night, seeing how expensive it would be, And literally right after that stream, I go on to Twitter, X, and on my timeline is this audition for Love-Chu.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told Albie, the head of Love-Chu, this. I'd never even heard of Love-Chu before this.
Right.
But I thought, you know what? Let's give it a try. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly.
And without knowing anything about this group, what they were about, I didn't know any of them, I applied.
Mm-hmm.
And I have applied for major agencies before and made it to interviews and stuff, but nothing ever panned out in the past. And for the most part, I've never even really been acknowledged like that they're even looking at my application or anything like that. And within, I want to say an hour, Albie was on my Twitter, liking my post, sharing my post. He followed me. And I had this moment of realization of, oh no, I am being perceived as a person. Oh no. And I ended up messaging my head mod, Katsumi. And I said, hey, Katsumi, I may have done a thing. And he's like, Zion, what have you done?
Yeah.
I said, I may have auditioned for a group, and the leader is looking at all my stuff and sharing my stuff. He's like, did you put any forethought into it, Zion? Because he's known me for years. And I was like, no. He's like, Zion, you cannot be doing this. Because if I join a group, like, he's coming with me. He's my head mod.
Yeah.
So it affects him as well. And so I spent the next, because like I didn't realize this, but the day that I auditioned for Love-Chu Generation 4 was the day that they had posted that auditions were live. And so they were going to be live for another 2 weeks.
Oh.
So I thought to myself, you know what? Instead of being anxious about whether or not I'm going to make it, I'm going to start, I'll look at the website, I'll look at, their content, I'll watch their streams.
Right.
And, best case scenario, I get accepted. I make a lot of cool new friends. I get to enjoy cool streamers. Worst case scenario, I don't get accepted, and I still find some really cool streamers and find a really great community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And auditions closed, and 2 days later, Albie was like, So, are you still interested? And that made me realize that in this 2 weeks that I've been, researching and learning about them, I also had the ability to form an opinion of if I was offered, I could also still have the ability to say no. But of
Right.
course, I said yes because they're all amazing and they're sweet little beans and really, really just great content. It's really great community, overwhelmingly positive,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've loved every moment of being in Love-Chu.
Yeah. I folks that I've interviewed from Love-Chu, and there's more coming in the future.
Mhm.
Always been great folks to talk to, and you are no exception to that. I do. I absolutely appreciate you coming on and talking with us. And before we get a little further in, you have
Mhm.
already you've been singing too. We haven't even talked about
Yes.
that. But you and the other members of your generation, I believe it is, have collaborated on a song, and we're going to do that right now. But I am backing out and going to let you introduce the title because I have no chance of getting it correct on the first try. I am chickening out.
Okay.
So, Zion, please tell us what we're about to hear.
Okay. So what they're about to hear is called Gotobun no Kimochi. It is a five-person cover that we did with two members of Generation 1, two members of Generation 4, and then a member of Dolce Chu.
Mm,
So
all
that
right.
is the song that we're about to listen to.
All right. That's coming up right now on Eric Loy Interviews. Well, folks, as you can hear, this is where normally we'd play the song that we just introduced, but unfortunately, YouTube has decided against it and filed a copyright claim. So, what we'll do instead is we'll come back to the rest of the interview and we'll put the link to the recording of this song in the description for the interview. Let's get back to our talk. So, how about that for a cover? So you get into the group, and now you're doing a five-way cover with folks that a couple of months ago you didn't know existed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is the second cover that I've actually done with members
Mm-hmm.
of Love-Chu. The
Mm-hmm.
first one that was released was actually my generation mates. It's a seven-way cover, plus a little animation that I made for our eighth member. And it's been a really fun experience. The first one, the seven-way cover, I was in charge of, and it was a lot of work,
Well,
but it taught me a lot. And doing this five-way cover, the person who was in charge of that one was actually Trina, Admiral Trina. She is so well put together. She inspires me so much, and each of these members definitely have taught me something new
mm-hmm.
about how to elevate my content in different ways. And so every project I do, every collaboration I do, whether it's streaming, acting, doing stuff with song covers, it's definitely been a huge motivator to do better because I want to be better.
Yeah,
And they're definitely showing me different avenues and helping me network and get good resources
yeah.
on how to do that.
It's funny you mentioned the good admiral. Not foreshadowing a little bit, but perhaps we'll be hearing from the good admiral sometime soon. Um, Perhaps, maybe, if we can get our act together on this end. Um, the having that sort of support so quickly, um, I imagine it's like a wind beneath your wings a little bit. When if there's some time, although you seem like a very energetic person, if there's sometimes when things might run you down a little bit, now you've got people to lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had like a network of people I've just slowly built up over the years. But Love-Chu is definitely because we're doing all these collaborations, we're streaming together, we've got tons of different chats where we're talking with our communities, we're talking with our generations, we're talking about a whole bunch of different opportunities that come up, sponsorships and things like that. It's because we're all kind of on the same page as to what's available, what's going on, and different projects that are available. And like we all can see what each other is doing. And that's it's a huge motivator. Every time somebody posts like, "Hey, I just got new overlays." I'm like, oh man, those are so cute. Maybe I should start looking at new overlays. Or,
Mm,
oh, hey, I'm opening up emote commissions. Awesome. Let me support you. Your emotes are really cute. Plus, I get emotes out of it. So,
yeah.
absolutely. And seeing others succeed, because we're a group, I also have the mentality of if one of us succeeds, we all succeed. And being able to be somebody who can help out, sometimes I feel like I'm not contributing. Then there are other times where people are like, no, you're amazing. Like, you're giving great advice, or
Mhm.
you're there to listen to us when we're having troubles and moral support and stuff. And I'm like, "Ah."
Mhm.
And so it's very wholesome.
That's cool. That is absolutely cool. Now, before we wrap things up here, and it's been a very quick interview, and I would love to have you back on again if you ever have any time, and all the other stuff you're
Of
doing.
course.
But
Well,
have you got commissions open for anything?
I do not do any sort of commissions.
Mm.
I've got a ton on my plate. I'm Yeah, I'm just not a commission person.
Yeah.
I don't ever feel like my art or my singing or my mixing skills are up to the level or standard that I would want it to be in order to feel comfortable opening commissions, especially with all the stuff I have going on. Time management is also very, very important. I rigged my 2D model, and I've actually had multiple people reach out to me about commissioning me
Yeah.
for rigging. And I'm like, I appreciate that you think that I am that skilled. I'm very honored. But I just don't have the time. I would love to, but I don't want to be the reason why you have to push your debut back, or like have to do re-edits because there's something you want different. So I always try to find somebody else to recommend them to that I feel would competently be able to do what they're asking of me. But I do feel honored anytime somebody reaches out to me about like doing digital art,
Yeah.
or doing rigging and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, y'all love me. Y'all really love me.
But fact is that a lot of people obviously feel you're talented in a lot of different ways. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking you this sort of thing.
It's very wholesome, because sometimes I think back and I think to myself, man, if myself from 10 years ago could hear all the things I'm doing now, like I'm a voice actor, I'm doing conventions, I'm like streaming, I'm doing all these amazing things, and she'd be like, no way, absolutely no, there's no way you could do it, but you just have to try, like
And
just do it. If you're on the fence about doing something that could potentially positively impact your life, and you're holding yourself back to some form of, anxiety, or not feeling like you're good enough, like what's the worst that could happen? People say no, or you don't get accepted. But what if you do? What if you do? And that's the thing you have to remember is, what if you do?
you're an absolutely amazing, talented person. I'm so glad to have met you through this.
Mhm.
We got to get you on again, and when you got some more, well, I can say that you have big things coming up, but you've always got big things coming up. Whenever the schedule opens up, we'll do it again and do some updates. Zion, we've got all the links we could find in the description for the interview here on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Eric Loy Interviews. Join us again next time when we talk to another member of the always interesting VTuber community.